Hello everybody and welcome to the Grow This Academy. Today is April 22nd, 2025, and it's a nice day here in Charleston, and we're going to talk about vegetable gardening, just some topics related to the crops that you're growing in the Grow This program, and maybe just some general principles of gardening. I'm Jett. I'm the Horticulture Extension Specialist at West Virginia University Extension. I work with vegetables, fruits, small fruits, herbs, and flowers. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you may have later online, or maybe you can email your questions to me at a later date if you think of some questions later. So anyway, we've got a lot of different crops that we can grow in the garden. You just have a small sampling of vegetables and herbs in your Grow This program, but we're entering into the really busy time of gardening, moving into late April and May. We're still not past our frost-free date here in West Virginia, which will be, depending on even for the southern counties, very early May, and the more northern counties, mid-May. So we're kind of watching those dates when to plant some of these crops, particularly your cucumbers, which are frost sensitive. But anyway, so we're going to look at some seeds. We're going to look at some sowing techniques. There's still plenty of time to peruse the seed catalogs and order more seeds of vegetables and herbs and flowers. We have a really long growing season ahead of us here, and some of these crops that you have in the Grow This program, you can seed in midsummer or even late summer. So we'll look at that in a moment. Anyway. So your seeds, come in these paper envelopes, and that's a really good way to store them. I usually store my seed in just a box, a dry box or cedar box or something like this, or I put them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the refrigerator. But when you do have extra seeds, any that may be left over from this year's project, just store them in a cool, dry place for next year. Or if you're not sowing them all this spring, and you want to sow them in late summer or maybe early fall, you can have them stored until then. Always consult the garden calendar. The 2025 garden calendar is an excellent resource for everyone to look at and sort of schedule how you plant things. We had recommended just on the garden calendar for April 20th to seed chives as an indoor plant for transplants, which you could have done 4 weeks earlier or 5 weeks earlier. But basically, if you chose to seed your chives as a transplant, then you'll be planting after the frost-free date, typically a 6-week-old transplant. So maybe give it a month and a half to reach the size where you can transplant it out in the garden. You probably wouldn't want to sow chives out in your garden until we're past that frost-free date. So that would be kind of a point where I would decide whether to plant in the garden these chives. But let's look at the individual crops. You have lettuce as one of your crops, which is mesclun lettuce, which is a leaf lettuce. Very easy crop to grow. It's basically just hand seeded and usually not transplanted. So if you've looked at the seeds already, you see that they're very small. They're not round. They're sort of elliptical shaped, so they're a little bit hard to handle. But you could seed them, now in your garden or in a container like what I brought here. So this is a 12 by 6 inch container. This is what we use for some of our herbs, and I just filled it with some standard potting soil, and it's a light textured potting soil. Moistened it down real well, and this would be excellent for seeding something like lettuce and growing this on your porch or on your patio as a container plant. So as you look at the seeds for your lettuce, very small seeds. So you basically, just hand sowing these onto the soil, and then you can water them in. They're very shallow seeded, so you really don't want to go very deep with lettuce seed at all. And we recommended in your guidebook to plant 24 to 30 seeds per foot because you have basically one lettuce plant every ½ inch. And you don't have to be that precise, but you can just sow it either in little rows, or you can just broadcast it over the soil and sow it that way. And then when you water this in, the seed will get into the soil and start germinating. So it may take 7 days for the seed to start emerging on the lettuce. So now's the perfect time to sow lettuce if you haven't done so yet, either in a container or in your garden. It's a cold tolerant. It's tolerant of frost, so it's not going to be damaged by frost, so there's plenty of time to harvest that. What I would recommend on the lettuce is maybe doing multiple sowings of lettuce, where you do one sowing every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, so that you don't run out of lettuce through the spring and early summer. So you may just say, I'll just do one container or one small patch of my garden bed in lettuce, and then I'll save some of the seed for a later sowing 2 or 3 weeks later. And when you have the lettuce, germinating, growing, it gets 3 or 4 inches tall, you can start cutting it. You can take multiple cuttings off of it and get some fresh green lettuce throughout the year with this mesclun lettuce. The lettuce would be an excellent companion plant with something like the cucumber. So if you are growing your cucumber in a raised bed or in your garden, you may grow this as your plant that you can grow lettuce around as a companion plant. So the cucumber would be a good companion plant for the lettuce and also for the chives as well. So I have chive seeds that I get from some other seed company. You have your seed packet of chives. Chives are a cutting herb, and they're related to onions. So they're in the onion family. One thing I wanted to make clear to you is that chives are a perennial, which means that they live longer than 1 year. So when you sow them this year, you will have 2 or 3 years of production off of them. You just have to make sure that they don't get too crowded in the pot or in the garden or the garden space that you have. So you actually may need to divide them next year when they start getting really clumpy and pretty large. But your chives should be seeded now, either as a transplant, or you can sow them, like I said, later after the frost date directly into the soil if you're going outside in the garden with it. And you can transplant them or, like I said, go with the direct seeded method on the chives. The chives can grow all summer, and they'll take the heat fairly well, but just make sure you water them regularly throughout the summer months. All these crops would benefit from some level of just even watering. The lettuce, takes up a lot of water, so make sure you water it every day. Maybe you want to water it in the morning, maybe in the afternoon, but it definitely needs to be watered regularly every day. Excuse me. So you have a pickling cucumber, which is exciting because you're going to be able to make pickles later this season. And so your pickling cucumber could be grown in a container like this, but preferably in a container that's a little bit bigger, even bigger than this grow bag that we have here. You probably need something that's 3 to 5 gallons in size. So growing your cucumbers in a 5-gallon bucket, or if you can get a larger container, that might be 3 to 5 gallons in volume, that would be perfect for your cucumbers. Your cucumber may need to be trellised, so you can put it in an area that it can climb up a fence or some type of string or netting, or you can just let it grow horizontal on the ground and pick the cucumbers as they mature. And like I said earlier, you can grow lettuce right under your cucumber plant. So if you want to have the lettuce shaded by the cucumber on a trellis, you can seed the leaf lettuce under the cucumber canopy and let the cucumber shade the lettuce plants. There are so many other vegetables that you can grow. This is a perfect time of the year to start seeding some of the cool season crops that you can grow in early summer. Like we're doing broccoli right now, so we're planting broccoli, we're seeding broccoli. So you can actually seed broccoli seeds. I have some broccoli here that we're putting in one of our test plots. And if you want to do cabbage, now's the perfect time to do cabbage, or even cauliflower as a good cool season early summer crop. And also, it's still too early to plant tomatoes and peppers, but you can seed them as transplants. Get your own containers for growing the transplants, and then just plant them as a 4 or 6 week old transplant if you seed them now. So that would be a good way to grow a warm season crop. Okay, so these crops I think will be interesting for you to grow. I tell gardeners every year, just try something new. And I think some of these crops are probably new for you. The chives are probably something that you haven't grown before, but it'll be a really nice cutting herb that you can put into salads, and you can use it to flavor other vegetables too. And I think you'll like the cucumbers either as a slicing cucumber, but also as a pickled cucumber as well. And the lettuce, like I said, just make sure you harvest it when the leaves are about 2, 4, no more than 6 inches long. And then you're harvesting it about 2 inches above the soil line, so it keeps regrowing. You should be able to get 3 harvests off of your lettuce planting. So just getting 1 harvest, don't think that you're done. The plant will regrow, and you'll be able to make a 2nd harvest and probably a 3rd harvest as well. But it's also nice, like I said, to do a 2nd seeding or a 3rd seeding, so that when the 1st seeding is done, you'll have other lettuce to harvest a little bit later on in the year. So just make sure you get good quality seed and store your seed, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not being able to use it, or you may want to share it with other folks who don't have seed. Those who participated in the Grow This program last year, where you had kale. So kale is a biennial plant, which means that it flowers the 2nd year. So if it is flowering now, it'll form seed pods on it that you can harvest the pods when they're dry. So wait until the seed pods are dry, shell the seed out of it, and then you can use that as seed for another planting of kale, either this spring and preferably for this fall. Would be a good fall crop to grow as a leafy green. So I don't know if there are any questions that are coming in, but I'm happy to field any questions that anybody has.
One so far. We had a grower who said their lettuce is growing, but it's crowded, and they're struggling to weed them now because they're clumped up, and they worry about weeding and pulling out good ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother thinning the lettuce at all. Just it's usually leaf lettuce. This is not head lettuce. So, like I said, we're going for ½ an inch between plants, which is pretty dense seeding. So don't worry if you have some seeds that may be clumped together. The plant will just grow new leaves, out of that clump, and you can just snip the leaves off with the scissors. So it's pretty hard to crowd leaf lettuce too much. Just make sure if you are watering it, you're not overwatering it. They need water. It's a fine balance, but you could overwater them and then trigger some sort of mildew or something that might cause them to rot. But yeah, just make sure you harvest them before the leaves get too big, and it'll keep regrowing back, even though it might be a little bit thick. If there are any weeds that come up, well, the lettuce is a pretty good competitor against weeds. So, I was saying mulch some things. The mulching of the cucumbers would be a good idea. It's kind of hard to mulch lettuce because it's so densely seeded, but if it is thickly seeded, it usually crowds out other weeds. So hopefully that'll be the case here. And maybe the good news is some weeds are edible. So if they are in the mix, sometimes they're another leafy green, because chickweed, which is regular weed that grows during the winter, and cress, which is winter cress, which is a weed. It gets mixed in with our lettuce and spinach sometimes, and we eat it just the same. But so anyway, yeah, hopefully you don't have any huge gaps in the planting where weeds can get start crowding them out. But lettuce should compete pretty good against the weeds.
We had someone ask when they should plant Swiss chard.
Well, Swiss chard is one of those garden vegetables that you can plant it anytime. It's perfect. Actually, lettuce is like that too. You can grow lettuce year round. You can grow Swiss chard year round. And so yeah, if you have a really nice variety of Swiss chard that you like, you can go ahead and seed it now, or you can grow it as a transplant if you want. and it'll take the heat really well. It's actually my hot weather replacement for spinach. Is either the chard or some of these other Asian greens. But yeah, we like the white stem chard, which is the Ford Hook, or there's a variety called Argentata. But some people like the Bright Lights mix, which is a multicolored chard mix. And chard is a lot like lettuce too. You can harvest it as a baby leaf crop. So if you just want to sow it really thick, you can just clip the leaves off and use it like a lettuce in salads, or you can wait till the leaves get big like kale leaves and just cook it as a cooking green, like you do with kale. But either way, and it's considered to be one of the most nutritious vegetables to eat as well. I just want to say one thing. There might be an issue about whether you transplant something or direct seeded. Seeding is easier to do sometimes, but you have to thin it. Sometimes particularly these seeds that we have here, which are very small, sometimes you may have to thin them if they are too clumped together. Whereas if you transplant, like if you transplant the chives or if you transplant the cucumbers, you have one plant where you plant it at, so you don't have to do the thinning. So that's the advantage of transplanting. But whatever is suitable for you. But for me as a gardener, I prefer to transplant. But it does add another step to the process. You do have to grow the transplant earlier, and get it seeded earlier. But I think that having a transplant out there and ready to grow, you get a little bit of a head start with it. So.
Somebody wants to know if it's too soon to plant beets.
No, perfect time to seed beets. Yeah, beets are a great summer crop. Yeah, go for it. We don't have enough people having beets in their gardens. It's almost, we have gardeners in this state who grow beets year-round. It's a little bit of an art to it, but you definitely can grow them in the summer months. And there are many varieties. We like Red Ace, which is our favorite variety. But you may also have heard a variety that's candy cane striped, which is called Chioggia, which is an heirloom variety. Very sweet. So you could go to some of these seed catalogs, like what I was holding up to the Baker Creek seed catalog. They carry Chioggia. You can eat the greens off of it like you do Swiss chard, but you can also eat the stem, the swollen stem, which is the beet. And so yeah, definitely grow your beets.
Do you need to fertilize chives each year?
I would put a light fertilizer on them. So the fertilizer that you could use, it's kind of an easy fertilizer, is just something that's water soluble, like the Miracle Grow mix that you buy. That would be a good general feeding program to water them, once or twice a month with a Miracle Grow mix, whatever the recommendation is, 1 or 2 tablespoons per gallon. And then that would be enough supplemental fertilizer for the chives. I also would recommend fertilizing the cucumbers with nitrogen too. They like nitrogen. So give them either some fertilizer, as they grow. When we do things in these pots like what we have here, sometimes I put in a slow release fertilizer like Osmocote. So I meant to bring my Osmocote bottle here, but I would put like a tablespoon in this mix here, and then I would grow my lettuce just with a slow release fertilizer. So Osmocote or something that's a slow release would be an option too. But you will need to regularly feed these vegetables through the growing season.
Are there any problems? I mean, these are all pretty easy to grow crops, but are there any problems that people typically run into with lettuce, chives, or cucumbers that folks just need to be on the lookout for?
Problems with growing these crops, I think what would be on my radar for these crops, of all 3 of them, probably the cucumber beetle for the cucumbers. Lettuce, I'm not sure you'll see aphids on lettuce. You could. Some other things that feed on lettuce, which are, like grasshoppers and things but usually you don't see that very often. But cucumber beetles on cucumbers and even summer squash can be devastating. So make sure the first time you see a beetle that's black and yellow, either with spots on it or with stripes on it, they're different species of cucumber beetles. those need to be removed from the plant because they are feeding on the flowers, they're feeding on the foliage, they're actually feeding on the cucumber fruit when it starts producing fruit. And then they transmit bacterial wilt, which is a devastating disease that could just wipe out your plants. So the moment that you see a yellow and black 1/4 inch long beetle, definitely remove them from the plant and make sure that they're not doing any damage. Okay. So it's 25 after. I mean, you guys can certainly, think of some questions and email me later. I'm always happy to come back and do, more tutorials on these crops, particularly when we harvest them and what they should look like when they're about ready to be harvested. You also want to make sure you take the survey as part of this academy today, and then with the code word SEEDS, S-E-E-D-S on it. And I enjoy talking to gardeners all over the state, and I just wish everyone a great gardening season. And like I said, just remember, try something new. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least you know you've done something you haven't done before. And that's what keeps gardening exciting, I think, is just finding out new things. And we'll talk more about gardening through the season here, but I wish everybody great success with the gardening year. Thank you.